But to the Prime Minister's woes, Lewis Goodall, people are queuing up to add to them, really, aren't they?
They are indeed, Sheila. Look, I think it's fair to say that the mood of the Parliamentary Labour Party is sulfurous right now. I mean, they're never a happy bunch. They're an Eeyore-ish bunch of people, but nonetheless, I think they are. That as we were talking about it yesterday, that statement, PMQs, it seemed to crystallise something for Labour MPs. It is curious in one sense, because, of course, when Keir Starmer at the third time of asking was forced to articulate that he already knew that Mandelson had maintained his relationship with Epstein even after his conviction as being a paedophile, he was just stating something that everybody already knew, that the Prime Minister knew. Indeed, that everybody else also knew. And yet, as always with politics, the kind of weird psychology of politics and the media and the news, it seemed to be the fact of his saying it that has so blackened the mood of Labour MPs.
And where he said it.
And where he said it. There was, I suppose, something especially grim hearing him say it. And it has, as I say, darkened the mood of Labour MPs who are thinking about the Prime Minister's future. And I suppose what is also true to say is that it is not as if the Prime Minister is entering this latest crisis in a particularly positive political position. No. It's not as if he's entering this crisis with a ton of political capital, of credit in the bank. No. It was already somewhere close to being exhausted. And the way that I'd put it is that a lot of Labour MPs feel this sense of deep ennui, of exhaustion almost, of feeling that this is the kind of latest disaster that they're having to go back to their constituencies. Needless as well. It's not as if something has shot from outside. You know, that this was ultimately a decision that, in effect, albeit not by design, brought Jeffrey Epstein and the Epstein scandal, one of the worst scandals of our age, one of the worst paedophiles to have ever lived, effectively to the heart of Downing Street. And Labour MPs are wondering, thinking about how that could have been the case. And of course, the best case scenario, and I do think we should talk about this, Sheila, I think that there is, on some level, you could say, there is a sort of weird hypocrisy to this story. Because if it is the case, let's imagine for a moment that we get these documents back from the Intelligence and Security Committee, and let's just imagine, for the sake of argument, that there is nothing in them that casts doubt on the Prime Minister's version of events, i.e. that Mandelson misled him, misled the Cabinet Office, misled the vetting process, and so on, and that he's not misled Parliament and he's not misled anyone. If that were the case, I think clearly he would have to resign. But let's imagine that that isn't the case. In which case, basically, we haven't learned anything new about what Keir Starmer knew about this, which is what we knew 12 months ago. 12 months ago, everybody knew about that relationship, that the fact that relationship had endured between Mandelson and Epstein. Of course, none of us knew just how lurid it was. None of us knew just how dark it was. None of us knew about the treachery. And none of us certainly knew about the treachery. But I was just looking back, just out of curiosity, many of the sort of organs of the press who are most sort of severely criticising the Prime Minister this morning, I was just looking back at some of the coverage of how they covered Peter Mandelson's appointment 12 months ago. Okay. The Guardian, just the headline, The Guardian, Mandelson's China stance makes him bad choice for US ambassador, say critics. Nothing about Epstein. The Times, again, focusing at the time on the question about China. There, Lord Mandelson to be confirmed as US ambassador despite China claims, say the Times. Going to GB News, Lord Mandelson met Chinese official in charge of targeting people as viewed as threats to the regime. The Telegraph, Mandelson rose back on China praise in attempt to woo Trump. Another GB News article focusing not even on China, but on the fact that Nigel Farage had been snubbed as US ambassador, as if that was the key takeaway and the key headline at the time. And just a few sort of comment pieces as well. Michael Gove, why Peter Mandelson is the best choice to handle Trump. Something from the Mail, ruthless, cynical, cunning. Why Mandy is the perfect choice as US ambassador. Now, I am not saying that that is in any way exculpatory of Keir Starmer. Of course, his information would have been better than everybody else's. But if Keir Starmer just knew what everybody else knew, then the question is not just for Keir Starmer, the question is for everybody as to why something that everybody is saying is so unacceptable now was not unacceptable then. And I think there's another point to this as well, Sheila, in my view, which I've been thinking about a lot, which is, I think Keir Starmer, the truth about why he appointed Mandelson, he just cannot say. And the truth is that it's not in spite of the Epstein links that he appointed Mandelson. In a sense, it's because of them. Because it reflects the fact that he had these links with
You think
Epstein.
that thought will have gone through his mind?
I don't know if it's explicit, but just in this sense is what I mean. In a way, the fact that Mandelson had that sort of relationship with Epstein is precisely why everybody thought, including Starmer, that Mandelson would be so at home in the court of Donald Trump. Those sorts of skills, those sorts of relationships with the rich and the powerful, and the obsequiousness which is necessary, and the cunning which is necessary, and frankly the darkness which is necessary, being so close and in such proximity to such wealth and power, precisely the skills that everybody thought would make him a useful ambassador to Donald Trump. Well, perhaps. Perhaps so. Obviously those are reports which exist, and I think that the counterfactual, which proves the point here, is: can we imagine for one moment that Keir Starmer would have even considered appointing Peter Mandelson if Kamala Harris had become president? Not in a million years. Because she would, presumably not have much appreciated the sort of social links that Peter Mandelson had cultivated, but we would have been talking about the appointment of someone very different. So what I'm saying is that I think Keir Starmer has got serious questions to answer. There's serious questions about his judgment, but insofar as he looked away, lots of other people looked away as well. So if Keir Starmer is guilty, so are many other people who are decrying him most aggressively today.
He's the only one who's Prime Minister.
Absolutely. So he's got to take the hit. All I'm saying is that the Westminster media, political, the system as it was, that he was not alone in making that judgment.
And while I've got you, can I take this in a different direction as well for a few minutes, which is that of the party, the Labour Party itself. It was so interesting on Monday evening to hear people like John McDonnell, Maurice Glassman, Jeremy Corbyn yesterday in the House of Commons saying, didn't we tell you about the direction that this party was being taken in? Didn't we tell you it was the wrong way? Now, in electoral victory terms, it was clearly the right way. But for Labour left voices, they're saying, this is the worldview we warned you about. This party should reshape itself to what it's supposed to be about. Do you think that will...
But then essentially, I think this is making the point that I'm trying to make, which is that, look, I think that there are lots of... Peter Mandelson... the dislike that he generates precedes his Epstein connection, right? The Labour voices that you're talking about dislike him, certainly for that, I'm sure, but they dislike and in some cases despise him for political reasons of 30 years standing. Absolutely. In terms of the direction that he's taken the Labour Party. Party factions, New Labour and all of these sorts of things. And those sort of old ghosts are being exhumed once again. Indeed, the question now, of course, is, if Keir Starmer is to fall over this, and of course there would be some irony in the most sort of senior political scalp to be felled or to be cut off as a result of the Epstein files being someone who is not in them himself, a man who is not in them, but whereas people around the world who are in them paying very little political cost. But nonetheless, if that were to happen, the ensuing Labour leadership contest, it seems to me that one of the key questions would then be the factional one that we're talking about, which is that if Keir Starmer's problem was a closeness, in effect, to Peter Mandelson, would that be a problem for other potential successors to Keir Starmer, including, of course, Wes Streeting, who has previously enjoyed quite a warm relationship with Keir Starmer? This is something that I put for the Newsagents podcast coming out later today to Brian Leishman, the left-wing Labour MP.
It goes deeper than the Prime Minister. I think we've got to have a proper analysis, objective analysis and diagnosis of the people that surround the Prime Minister. And we've got to then really look at his Chief of Staff.
You think Morgan McSweeney has to go?
I think Morgan McSweeney has got an incredible amount of influence within the Labour Party, his direction, how he shaped it in his own image, and I think he's got questions to answer.
But do you think he should go?
Yes.
Do you think that anybody who has had close relationships with Peter Mandelson, that who might fancy themselves as a future leader, do you think that would disqualify them?
I would say so, yes, because you look at Peter Mandelson, it typifies the problems that we've got as a political class in this country.
So that would include, for example, Wes Streeting?
I would say any allies of Peter Mandelson, to be honest, need to have a look at themselves in the mirror and ask questions of themselves.
There we go. And then so you can already see the kind of pieces starting to fall in terms of how that leadership contest would weigh up. And I would say that's one of the reasons, by the way, I think in terms of Keir Starmer's own future, there are two big problems in terms of actually replacing him. One, if they're going to do it, they would have to do it pretty quickly because we've got the May elections coming up. And, the election period for that will start in March, and you don't really want to be going into that with a sort of leadership contest hanging over it. And then secondly, in a way, it's a bit of an imperfect time for many of the potential contenders. I mean, Burnham's not in Parliament. Angela Rayner, who was pretty pivotal yesterday and is clearly on manoeuvres, nonetheless still got this ongoing tax investigation which has not been resolved. Streeting, again, to some extent at least, implicated by association with his long relationship with Peter Mandelson. Shabana Mahmood probably in the strongest position, given as a sort of relatively sort of clean skin in all of this. But nonetheless, actually, in terms of many of the potential contenders, imperfect timing if Starmer were to go now over this issue.
I was listening on Monday to a political podcast that doesn't have the same...
Which what? You listen to other political podcasts, Sheila? What? How dare you?
I listen to yours.
Yeah,
cool
well,
your jets.
okay.
It doesn't have your ratings. It doesn't have the same...
Well, few do.
Superb presenting skills on offer.
Few do.
Few do. But one of them, won't say who, was positing that one of the questions this raises is money and political parties. You're hanging out with the, Labour ministers, Labour figures hanging out with big business for funding, individual MPs hanging out or taking money from big business for funding. Transparently so, but still, it's what's in the bloodstream. You've equally got on the left, the influence of the trade unions, that in the longer term, that's what needs to change in our party politics. What say you?
Perhaps.
On a better podcast.
Perhaps. Well, indeed, perhaps. I think there's obviously a question here, which again, and I don't know the answer to this. To what extent, which has been sort of ricocheting around my head all day, to what extent is the Mandelson-Epstein relationship sui generis? Is it unique? Or is it representative of a wider way of doing politics in this country and around the world? To what extent... what I'm saying is we've seen all week this extraordinary web that Epstein managed to weave over years and years and years, encompassing everything from American presidents to, de facto deputy prime ministers of the UK, British royals, the Norwegian royal family, tech bro, you name it. They're all in there. Is that revealing of the realities of the machinery of global power? Or is it something unique to Epstein? I.e., are there other Epsteins out there? Maybe they're not paedophiles. Maybe they're not absolute monsters in the way that Epstein was. But actually, are there people who peddle consistently that sort of influence and, frankly, corruption on a daily basis? And on the basis of what we've seen, you can understand why many people feel that it vindicates their long-standing belief that the answer is yes, and that the global power structures are corrupt.
Or he was a spy, which is what
that's also
has been saying.
endless twists.
Yeah.